Hello and welcome to the programme. Now, in recent years, Ukraine has become a true booming centre for contemporary art in Eastern Europe. Various galleries regularly pop up and form their audience, turning the visitor into an integral part of the art process. Frequent changes of expositions and lectures contributed to their greater popularity. As the latest proof of that, a performative lecture was held recently in Kyiv, hosted by a Belgian artist and resident at the Izolyatsia cultural platform, Steve Schepens, who now joins us in the studio. Hello, Steve. Thank you for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
So, firstly, what is performative art, and what was your lecture about?
Well, performative art comes from the conceptual side of contemporary art. And actually, the fact is that every artist, once he starts or once he decides to be an artist, performs art. Whatever he does or she does is in the context of art.
Because I looked on the Izolyatsia Facebook page before we came on, and I saw from the lecture you had a naked male model who
Indeed.
was standing on the table. So what sort of role did he play in this performative art?
There was a reference to Donatello's David, which is like a very beautiful young man, the David and Goliath story, representing that, and standing with boots and a funny hat on.
Yeah.
And this I appropriated for my projects, which I started in 2007 in Ukraine with plastic bags.
Yes, and I thought this was really interesting because you said that the thing that linked people from Donetsk and Lviv was the fact that everyone had these plastic bags, the black plastic bags, which you could probably still get, actually.
Well, you can't get the Boss bags anymore, so with the Boss label on it. Now it's more like ATB and BMW.
And
so
other sort of brands.
But what was specific about Lviv is that it was Boss there, and in Donetsk it was BMW. So you couldn't have either of them in the other city.
So what did you make of this then, the difference? What did it really tell you about the different societies, how they were linked or how they were different?
Well, first of all, when I came to Ukraine for the first time, 2007, it was this Boss bag that attracted my attention. And there was no Boss shop around. So for me, it was almost as a symbol for common people to walk around with these bags, though it was a big brand.
Yeah, I think it's amazing, actually. You said you've been here since 2007, so you saw how things changed in the early part of the decade. Then you had the Euromaidan revolution, and this really changed the contemporary art scene as well. So before we go any further, we have a clip from a programme that we did about you, and I'd like to show you and ask you a couple of questions afterwards. So let's play that clip now.
Okay.
The events of 2014 found their reflection in the later works of the artist.
I sometimes use the Ukrainian colors. I use lots of references to Euromaidan also that influenced me. I thought actually the whole barricades were one big art sculpture which you could cut out and put immediately into a museum. It was very artistic and creative, the whole revolution.
So there we go. There's one of the clips from the programme. So how did the Euromaidan revolution actually change your perception of art?
The way that the artists didn't produce actual artworks anymore, but were engaged in the revolution itself. So they didn't make sculpture or painting, though they were giving lectures and they were present on the barricades.
And you always say that, I read an article that said that really the background, the foundation of your art is actually the more traditional art, you would say. But in your opinion, is traditional art usually based on politics and culture? Or in some traditional art, should I say?
Well, in the history of art, it is always linked to politics and culture, definitely. but also to religion. For me, I come from painting. Painting was traditionally linked to religion because most of the patrons were religious people.
Mm. And what about, you gave the lecture Sobbing for Boss, and I did a search for this online, and there was a search that said, is it okay to cry at work? Which I thought was pretty funny, and I thought perhaps this is not quite related to the exhibition, but can you tell us why this title?
Well, there is quite an awry history with the Boss label connected as well, because Boss developed or designed the SS uniforms, and at a certain moment in Lviv I captured a video which was on the market square where you can find these Boss bags for not even 1 hryvnia, and these Boss bags were floating in the wind. Sometimes you had only the SS and then you had the Boss. So I'm also sobbing for its history.
And obviously you've been with Izolyatsia for a long time, and their story in itself is amazing. The fact that in 2014 they were forced to leave, and even a lot of your work was destroyed as well.
Yeah, a work of artists always gets destroyed because it can be controversial to certain political views.
But do you think when people see perhaps your works, do you think that there was something controversial in them? What controversial messages were there?
Well, I personally, I don't think that my work is that controversial, especially not when you put it in Western Europe. But it's about war, it's about revolution, so that certain political views cannot cope with when you out criticism.
And tell us a bit about what's your favourite work that you've done in Ukraine over the past 10 years, since 2006 or 2007. You said you first
2007.
came here. So out of all that time, what's your favourite project been? Can you tell us a bit about that?
2015. I made Club La Cabane, that's the title of the work, and I appropriated a shed outside of 40 kilometers outside of Kyiv and redesigned it completely, cleaned it, painted it, redecorated it, reconstructed, did the whole thing. So it was a normal shed in a field, and I made it as a kind of discotheque or something highbrow from something lowbrow. And it was a kind of political statement, but also a sort of active diplomacy. So this work should have been transported throughout Eastern Europe into Western Europe, and so like a diplomat should have worked. However, it was burned down.
Yeah, well, and actually, I think it's really interesting how you say it was 40 kilometers outside of Kyiv. So what is it that makes these small villages or small towns where you work, what makes them so special? Why do you choose these locations over perhaps the bigger cities like Kyiv? Is it the landscape? Is it the way people think? What is it about these different places?
The humor, I would say.
Can you explain that a bit more? What about the humor?
For me, the most important thing about Ukrainian people and the Ukrainian mentality is their humor. It's very similar to Belgian humor, actually.
Oh, yeah? How's it similar?
Absurd, surrealistic, yeah.
It's funny, actually, for British people, we have also a very different humour that not many people, perhaps outside of Britain, understand as well. So is it the same, do you think, for Ukraine and for Belgium?
Yeah.
People have their own unique humour.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So what's your perception on how art in Western Europe is different to Eastern Europe? Or do you think, perhaps, maybe rephrase the question, how do you think people who look at art in Western Europe perceive work that's done in Eastern Europe? Is there a big difference in the different styles, the different themes?
Well, I guess the first problem would be is that they don't know that much about Eastern European art. So they have a lack of knowledge about it. and they perceive it as something which is unreachable almost. Though we have a lot of Eastern European art in Western European countries, it's almost like, yeah, exotic.
And why is that? Why do you think that people can't reach out to it or perhaps quite understand it?
It's because Eastern Europe is misunderstood. We only have these images of Eastern Europeans being vodka drinkers and yeah, something.
Also negative stereotypes.
I think so. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's very interesting. I have one final question for you.
Mm-hmm.
We have just about a minute left. What's your future plans in terms of exhibitions? Because you've exhibited in Brussels. Before 2014, you exhibited in Donetsk as well. So, how do the different audiences perceive your work depending on where you are? And second question is, what's your future plans as well? Are you planning on exhibiting elsewhere?
Yes. How do they perceive my work?
Yeah, depending on where you are. Perhaps if people look at your work in Donetsk or people look at your work in Brussels, what's the difference between the audience reaction?
Again, this exotic kind of part. I'm coming from Belgium, exhibiting in Ukraine. There's a different layer playing part of the perception, and the opposite as well. The works I've done in Ukraine are perceived differently in Belgium. If I would try to go to Moscow now, I guess I would have a problem with all the work I've done in Ukraine. Future plans would be Bulgaria. Will be Bulgaria in the start of 2019, and then Brussels, Western Europe, the States also.
Okay, well, thank you so much for coming in, and best of luck with all your future work.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was Steve Schepens. He's an artist and resident at the Izolyatsia cultural platform here in Ukraine. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more on UATV.